Okay, so this lecture kind of coordinates with the ones you had last week. Here you are drafting the essay itself, your rough draft. For some of you, that'll be your final draft, but it shouldn't be. Your rough draft should just be what you're getting down, without really giving it a lot of thought, just getting all your ideas on paper, and then you revise the essay into the final draft, kind of shining the diamond, which we'll talk about next week. So, as we mentioned before, the writing is a process, the drafting is a process. So, you've got the pre-writing part of the process where you kind of let some ideas ruminate in your mind, kind of bubble up and come up with ideas that you could use within your essay. Uh, I was lucky that when I was in college at the University of Hawaii, I didn't have a car. I walked everywhere. And so that's where I would do pre-writing. I would think about things in an essay I had due for like a drama class, and I would just think about different ideas. Then once you've got a fair idea of where you want to go with the paper, you draft it. You write all those ideas down. Then you revise it. And this is what we'll talk about next week. This is the major portion of actually writing an essay, or it should be. It's the harder part as well, to actually get it refined to where it's well organized, it's well supported, everything's logically laid out. Then you proofread it, which a lot of people think is revising, but it's not. So that's just making the minor corrections, grammar errors, spelling errors, that type of thing. And then you publish it. So for you, that's printing it out, or in this case, submitting it online for me to have a look at. Now, consider the rhetorical situation, which is the author, the text, and the audience. So consider what you want to say and what's your reason for writing the essay. Don't let your purpose be, yeah, I'm trying to get an A in this class. Let your purpose be, I'm trying to accomplish something with this essay. I'm trying to get people to change their mind about something, or I'm trying to show why one, in the comparison essay, why one thing is better than the other. Use the strategies we've looked at, brainstorming, free writing, and then always reconsider your purpose and your audience as you're writing the rough draft. So the structure of the essay should be, now this is for an argument essay, but it's basically the same except for one point. So you should be writing an engaging introduction. If there's any background information that your audience needs, that should go into the introduction. You want to make it interesting as well, though. I mean, it's why the introduction paragraph is your most important, because if you don't engage your audience in a written work, why would they keep reading it? They can just throw it down and say, well, that was boring. I'm not reading any more of that. And you more than likely want to state your claim. And when we go over thesis, I'll talk about how it doesn't have to be in the first paragraph, but you have to have a reason why it isn't at the last sentence in your introductory paragraph. Don't just put it somewhere because you're not thinking. Then what the majority of your essay is going to be is the support. This is the body of your essay. This is where you're providing your proof, your support, any explanation that's needed. Now, this is what's different between most essays and an argument essay is a rebuttal. You will be writing argument essays, probably a lot of your essays in college. We're not doing it in this class, but when you get to Comp 2, they will, and other classes will. There you have what's called a rebuttal. So if somebody has a counter argument against your argument, against your claim, you have to rebut that, show why your claim is better than the counter argument. And then finally, your second most important paragraph again is your conclusion, where you wrap everything up. Now, with your thesis, you're looking, if it's supposed to be an argument, is it arguable? So we're not so much worried about that in this class, but we are, is it specific? And as I go over thesis, we'll talk about that you want to say exactly where you're going with it. Not just making a general claim. Give some of the one or two of the main points that you're going to use to support it. Make sure it's not too broad, not too narrow, just right, like Goldilocks there in the bed. All right, if it's too broad, So let's say you've got to write a paper for a history class and you're studying the Civil War, and it's a 3 to 5 page paper, and you write on the causes of the Civil War. Well, that's way too broad for 3 to 5 pages. That's a book, right? But saying that the attack on Fort Sumter is a cause may be a little too narrow. You may so when it's too broad, you're going to be way too superficial. If it's too narrow, you're not going to have enough to write out 3 to 5 pages. And always ask, is it interesting? Would somebody find this thesis, this claim to be interesting? So with the introduction, again, interest the reader. That's why the Franklins are up there, the Benjamins, because everyone's interested in $100. Also, if there's any background information that's needed. So I put this guy up because he scammed all these poor old women out of their retirement savings in Florida. And if they'd had background information on him, maybe they wouldn't have gotten away with it. And this is how bad Florida is. They make you write your own number out. They don't even have the little board where you put the numbers in. Anyway, if there's background information, make sure you put that in your introduction. So uh, when I wrote my long critical paper in grad school, a majority of the paper was based on a thing called ideological state apparatus, which is a neo-Marxist theory put forth by a guy named Althusser. And I didn't expect my audience to know what that was. So my introduction ended up being 2 pages because I had to give the background information on what ideological state apparatus was. Hopefully you don't need that kind of background for anything you write in college, but you might. So any background information, this is again why you have to take into account who your audience is, because if you know your audience, you will know what information they already have, or you'll be able to have some idea. And then you can limit the background information. You may not have to give any because your audience will be familiar with your topic. All right. So that's with the background info. What will your audience already know? What do they need to know to be able to understand all of the essay, and what do you need to explain beforehand to make sure they can get through the essay and understand it and they're not lost right away. All right, now when you write the introduction, you may decide to do that after you finish the essay. I've had students who, I think I mentioned this already, who have to write out the whole essay before they realize what it's about. And then they write out a thesis and then they write out their introduction. I always did everything in a logical manner from going from A to B to C to D. That's just how I think. So I would write my introduction first thing. So you got to decide when you have to, what's going to work for you. You need to have a hook. How are you going to draw them in? So one of the ways you can do it is with a question, but you have to answer the question. Please be aware of that. If you ask any questions in an essay, you have to answer those questions before the essay is through. What you should not do is say, how would you feel? Because you can't answer that. Plus, you should never use you. I think I've mentioned this. Do not use I and do not use you in any of your academic essays. Now, when we get to narration, you're more than welcome to use I there because it's a narration, it's a story, it's not a truly academic essay. Everything else has to be third person. So you would never ask, how would you could ask, how would one feel? But again, how are you going to answer that? You can't ask those type of questions. It's got to be a factual question that you've got the answer to. You can tell a story. An anecdote is a short story. That's always works well. People love stories. If you've got a story that's relevant to your topic, then tell the story. You may have a really interesting fact. Like, did you know, if you're writing a paper on climate change, did you know that cow farts are more responsible for climate change than automobile exhaust? Right? So if you're saying you should become a vegetarian because cows are killing us faster than cars are, that's an interesting fact that maybe a lot of people don't know. All right, now organizing. Everything in the body should support the claim. So the middle of the essay, after the introduction and before the conclusion, everything needs to relate back to your thesis, to your claim. Within your paragraphs, your topic sentence can go anywhere within the paragraph, but uh, you've got to make sure that it's in a place that makes sense. Normally, like 95% of the time, topic sentences of a paragraph or the first sentence of the paragraph. Same way that 95% of the time, the thesis of an essay is the last sentence in the introductory paragraph. You may use one paragraph for several reasons, or in this first essay comparisons, or only one. Or you could use several paragraphs for one reason or one comparison. All right, the evidence should build on itself, and that means that you go from A to B to C to D in a logical manner. Don't be going A to B, then we go to D, then we go back to A. All right, be careful of that. Have this logical flow. Don't jump around. This is part of the revision process. This is one of the reasons why I suggest you do at least a scratch outline, is to be able to see the entire essay on a single page in a scratch outline. Like, well, you know what? This point right here, 3/4 of the way down the outline, would probably go better up here near the top. And again, with the comparison, you can do the point by point or the block out method and use the outline to help you organize. Finally, conclusions, your second most important paragraph. Many times you can just revisit the thesis. You may restate the strongest evidence you've given. You may have a call to action. So you've written on climate change and compared gas-powered cars to electric cars, and the call to action is, next time you buy a car, buy an electric car. Whatever, something along those lines. All right, so that does it for drafting. Next week we go into revising, which is actually, as I said, the most important part of the writing process.